Hi, everyone. My name is Dimitrija Chabarkapa, and I'm Director of Basketball Research at Jayhawk Athletic Performance Lab at the University of Kansas. Today, I will talk about markerless motion capture system and its application in sport-specific setting that can help practitioners obtain a broad spectrum of biomechanical parameters that can be used to help athletes reduce the likelihood of injury occurrence. So before I start, I would like to briefly reflect on these two terms, injury prevention and injury risk reduction. When we talk about injury prevention, that means 100% elimination of injury risk, in my opinion. I do not think that we can do that. I don't think that that is realistic, because when we decide to participate in any sport, especially team contact sports such as basketball or American football, the injury risk is inevitable. I think that the more appropriate term that we should use is injury risk reduction. I will see these posts on social media, do this exercise for injury prevention. I don't think that is 100% correct. I don't think that we can completely prevent injury. And I think what we are trying to do as sports scientists and strength and conditioning practitioners, we're trying to develop training regimens and utilize all these innovative technology to obtain better insight into athletes' performance and to assess athlete to a better extent in order to minimize most likely non-contact injuries and to optimize athletes' on-court performance. As you may already know, there are multiple motion capture systems on the market that you can choose for biomechanical performance analysis. Some of them are marker-based systems, sensor-based systems, or the most innovative markerless motion capture systems. I think that all of them have positive and negative sides. But when it comes to which system should be used in the practical setting, I think that two things are the most important: time efficient and non-invasive analysis. I have actually seen athletes walk out from testing protocols when marker-based systems were used. Sometimes just placing markers, these fluorescent markers that are required for marker-based motion capture systems, can alter movement pattern, right? I mean, when I had markers placed on myself and when I started running on a treadmill, I immediately became conscious of these markers placed across my body. And if the marker falls down, you have to pause the testing, marker has to be reapplied, and then you have to continue. So I think that the markerless motion capture systems are something innovative that can allow for rapid, non-invasive, and time-efficient performance analysis, right? Also, by utilizing these markerless motion capture system, we can avoid that skin artifact that can be attributed to movement of the skin where the marker is placed. Similar thing applies for sensor-based systems, where you actually have this dry fit shirts or suits in specific pockets where these sensors are placed across the body, or they can be secured with the Velcro straps. But again, all these sensors or markers are prone to that movement that may be problematic and that may alter, in my opinion, accuracy and validity of that testing measurement, right? So what we use in our lab and what we found most applicable in practical setting are these markerless motion capture systems. Right here, you can actually see DARI motion capture systems that we use in our lab. We have multiple of these systems, and one of the big benefits when we use this system with athletes is it's very portable. It allows for rapid analysis. We can pick and choose which elementary movements we would like to include in motion health performance analysis. And it's composed of 8 cameras that are very light and a computer that can just be packed in one box and moved to specific testing location. In our lab, we use the previously mentioned 3-dimensional markerless motion capture system for motion health performance analysis with a broad spectrum of athletes. We can utilize this software and hardware to analyze kinetics and kinematics of various types of elementary body movements that involve shoulder flexion extension, shoulder abduction, adduction, internal external rotation, trunk rotation, bilateral squat, pistol squats, etc., etc. So the beauty of this system is that all these movements can be performed within 7 to 10 minute time interval, sometimes even faster, depends how many movements we decide to include in a testing protocol. And via visual Hull technology and inverse dynamics, we can obtain a broad spectrum of kinetic and kinematic parameters of interest. you can actually see here how the stick figure is generated, and these 8 cameras are simultaneously capturing every movement that's performed within this area. So within 30 to 60 seconds upon the completion of all these protocols that are administered within this health motion performance analysis, we can obtain a full testing report that has more than 500 biomechanical variables of interest. What you can see here is a motion health performance analysis summary. You can see a list of movements that the athlete performed, and these movements can be expanded or shortened. Again, we usually perform 15 to 17 movements in regular screening protocol when we work with basketball players, volleyball players, or soccer players, right? You can pick and choose whatever movements you would like to include in your testing protocol. It is like a menu in a restaurant. You can pick and choose whatever you think it might be beneficial for that athlete. And based on that list of movements, these 5 scores are generated. So these 5 that you can actually see here, they're algorithm-derived scores. That's kind of summary that we like to use to depict overall performance that's founded on 500 plus biomechanical parameters of interest that actually you can examine in these reports. So explosiveness score, kind of overall score, that's a score that represents jump-related performance summary. It is based on, for example, jump heights during these bilateral or unilateral jumps. Then we have functionality. Functionality is an aggregate of all squat-related movements, such as squat depth. Then we have dysfunctional vulnerability. That's motion and balance-related asymmetries observed across all these movements performed during this motion health performance analysis. Then we have readiness. Readiness is kind of overall cumulative score, right? So if we think about readiness, that's explosiveness plus functionality minus dysfunction, right? It tells you, okay, let's sum up all the good stuff and subtract this negative stuff, right? And then we have quality. Quality is movement pattern across all movements completed through this screening protocol, right? And involves all these compensation patterns. Something that will impact these scores are high unilateral forces or limited range of motion due to history of injury. So what we often get asked is how good and how repeatable are these scores? You can actually see here that these scores in this system demonstrated high levels of repeatability. Dysfunction, explosiveness, and functionality score are represented here. And you can see that this study involved male and female participants. Female participants are gray dashed lines. Male participants are gray solid lines. And the black bolded line represents the overall mean. And you can actually see here that across 6 testing sessions, 3 sessions performed in day 1, 3 sessions performed during day 2, actually these scores remain consistent. Another layer of this motion health performance analysis report can target some of the areas for further improvement. It can summarize these deficiencies or issues that may be observed based on a detailed biomechanical analysis, right? And it can give you that overall readiness score. What's beauty of this system is that it compares you to a broad spectrum of participants that have been previously examined. I mean, anonymously, you can actually look at a large pool of 10 to 20,000 participants. So it is a cloud-based system, right? Database system that all these scores are generated based on the percentile rankings where you belong, right? So also, you can see here, for example, quality scores, how you did specific motion or performance, what you did, right? But again, the interesting part of this is which a lot of practitioners would like to see, okay, what are the top 3 things that we would need to focus on, right? So for this individual is right hip mobility. Second thing is right knee alignment during loading phase of the jumping motion, and right shoulder mobility. So these 3 things might be some of the highlights that practitioners can pay attention to, right? If we would like to take a deeper insight, we can actually look at a full biomechanical analysis that I will briefly talk about in the next couple of slides. This is only a small part of the detailed biomechanical analysis that this athlete performed during motion health performance screening protocol. You can look at a kinetic and kinematic parameters of interest for each elementary body movement that this athlete performed. For example, we can look at ground reaction forces during takeoff, we can look at a net impulse, and we can also split that by each limb, left leg, right leg. We can also look at a mobility scores, for example, for each exercise. For example, this athlete when performing lateral lunge movement has a limited hip and ankle mobility. I think that performing these motion health performance screening protocols is of critical importance in practical setting. First, for establishing baseline. And some people say, well, why would we need to get tested? Why is baseline important? I think that having a baseline measure is of critical importance because what we as practitioners or sports scientists, coaches and strength and conditioning coaches would like to see, we would like to see athlete progress. We would like to see make step by step progress, positive progress, but God forbid, sometimes injuries happen, right? So if we know what the baseline was and the athlete gets injured and the performance plummets down, right? We know where the athlete needs to be. So he or she can make necessary improvements to come back to the baseline levels, as well as make further improvements that would optimize their on-court or on-field performance in future. Another interesting application of three-dimensional markerless motion capture systems can be in assessing return to play criteria on an individual basis. These systems may allow for objective performance assessment, right? Previously, we talked about an individual training regimen approach, right? One training regimen does not fit everyone, right? So we actually have to individualize loads, et cetera. But in this case, this system can allow for objective performance assessment, right? And what you can see here, based on the percentile ranking mobility post ACL reconstruction, is that all of them started relatively at the same level, but 6 months post-surgery, this individual was not on the same level as this individual. So this individual has greater chances of returning to play criteria than this individual. And again, what if this individual is released to return to everyday life activities or return to play and did not reach the adequate level of mobility in a knee joint? I think that is a risk for re-injury. And again, I think that by utilizing these systems, it may allow us to objectively assess individual progress that will minimize chances for re-injury in the future. Last but not least, I think it's interesting to mention one of the recently published studies that came out from our lab that examined relationship between some of the most commonly used health-related physical fitness parameters, such as VO2 max and body fat percentage, and these 5 scores that I previously mentioned obtained from this markerless motion capture system. These algorithm-derived scores that represent that overall performance measures, such as summary of your performance, right? You can actually see here the readiness score is positively associated with VO2 max and negatively associated with body fat percentage. Also, you can see that explosiveness score, again, scale that represents all the jump-related performance, such as jump heights during all these movements performed during health motion screening protocol, is positively associated with VO2 max.